just like to welcome you all and thank you for availing yourselves on a Saturday afternoon in South Africa, or on a Saturday morning in other parts of the world, or on a Saturday night in different parts of the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a discussion around an Afrocentric approach from an African's point of view and from a South African's point of view, specifically regarding what we see or what I see as BRICS and the role that it has in trying to improve developing economies and what we regard as developing countries. So specifically, one thing that I'd like to highlight is the youth of the movement itself, the youngness, if I may say, of the movement itself, because BRICS in itself is not as old as the other movements that surround it. However, the strides and the potential that it holds to improve developing markets and developing economies and developing countries is so massive that it has become problematized in the Western world. Because of the potential that it holds. Thus, it has become so easy for Western media and the likes to portray it as something that it tends to not be. So the first thing that I'd like to indicate is South Africa comes into BRICS in the year 2010. So it's relatively new. It's the newest member of the movement. It's the smallest economy within the movement and the organization. It also lacks in quite a few things such as development and just the economy in general. However, the impacts that the BRICS on itself has had over the last few years, over the last 10 years or so on South Africa have been there for us all to see. But the most important thing is that we need to be cognizant of the fact that BRICS in itself is not only supposed to be helping those countries that are within, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, but it's supposed to help other rising economies or other countries that have potential to rise. The most important section that I'd like to discuss about BRICS is specifically the BRICS Bank and what it was aimed to do, what its effort was aimed at, and how it was looked at as a movement and as a bank that was aimed at fighting imperialistic banks or movement organizations such as the IMF, such as the World Bank, which have their own prejudices towards the West. So the BRICS Bank, it's supposed to be, which renamed itself into the New Development Bank, was supposed to support developing economies and provide alternative funding to countries in the global South. This was not a bank which was aimed at helping countries which were relatively successful, but those countries that initially needed help from places like the IMF and the World Bank, they could now be funded by the BRICS Bank. This bank was supposed to be so helpful to the developing countries and was supposed to help us as developing countries avoid interactions with the IMF and the World Banks, which we know have been problematic to the global South over the last years. So it was a movement at going against imperialistic banks, which only aimed to benefit themselves and the global North, or what we regard as the global West. So it's important that for us as the developing countries, we needed this bank to be quite successful. And however, if you look at the research, not much of the funding that the organization has funded has gone towards helping these countries which have required a lot of help, which have required help from them. So it is important that the movement in itself or the organization in itself has to relook itself, which we are hoping it's going to do with the new president, which is going to govern over the new development bank. If that was to be, then a lot of countries that are in the global South would find themselves able to move out of having to deal with places like, or banks like the IMF and the World Bank, and now be focused on banks that only care about helping the rising countries and which do not center Western imperialist ideologies and Western imperialist countries over the global South. So that's a section that I just wanted to touch on, because most importantly, for for a country to be successful, there needs to be economic development. And for you to be able to have economic development, you need to be funded. And you cannot be funded if the country that is supposed to be funding you, or the organization that is supposed to be funding you, is funding you with itself being centered at the core of what it is, what you are trying to get to. I don't know if that makes sense. So what I'm basically trying to say with that is that you cannot ask for help from the IMF. That's just what I was trying to get at. So it's important that you have an organization or a bank that specifically is aimed at helping these countries, which are countries in the global south, countries which need this financing, and not so that the financing can eventually benefit the global west and the organizations, but actually fund these countries so that these countries can remove themselves from the historical debt and the historical suffering which they witnessed throughout the years. It's important for us to also understand that with BRICS hosting close to half the global population, we shouldn't be having the problems that we're currently having with the movement itself, with the organization itself. We should be finding ourselves with the movement that's capable, whether it's economically, whether it's socially capable, to not be reliant on the global West powers. However, what has happened is that instead of BRICS instead of BRICS working towards being a union of countries that can go against the global West, we found ourselves having them welcome countries that are in the global West into the World Bank, into the BRICS Bank. And that for me is fundamentally problematic, because once you say that you might not be able to fund them, you might not be willing to fund them, however, they can still donate, then you're already introducing or welcoming people that have been problematic for hundreds and hundreds of years into an organization that's supposed to be funding the same people that they've been taking advantage of for many hundred years. So it's important that this becomes this becomes an independent organization which does not aim to or welcome funding from the outside, from these countries that are very problematic. Because once you welcome them, then over the years, we know that there's every chance that they can overtake what you're trying to do and continue with their imperialistic agenda. So it's something that I think that as an organization, BRICS itself needs to look into this, as it is very important that if you say that you work for the global south, you must not welcome the global north that has taken advantage of these countries over the years, because you're just fighting yourself in the long run. Now, I think that's about it, because the most important thing for me that I was trying to touch on is that from a South African and an African point of view, we cannot afford to be recolonized through, through partnership. We are supposed to be sharing the stage on equal partnership and on equal levels, not in a sense that one has to come with financial power to overtake the projects and ideas that we are trying to push as a continent of Pan-Africanism, of Afrocentrism. Because what happens in the long run is that once you welcome the imperialists into specifically the bank, the new development bank, then you're already going to fight against the same people that you are aiming, or that your organization is aiming to help. So that is the primary message that I was trying to get out there. I thank you, brother.
Thank you very much, Paseka. Thank you so much. Paseka, again, is a young man from South Africa. I met him like 2 or 3 years ago. When I went there to present a paper or some papers during a decoloniality conference. Beautiful soul, great organizer, great intellectual, and he has the heart in the right place. And I wanted him to be I wanted him to be here today because I want to appreciate him for everything that he has been doing for Africa and for our organization and for myself.